39 Smooth was Green Day's first studio album, released all the way back in 1990. And unfortunately, I think it's their weakest. I do think it's really cool though that Billy and Mike recorded this when they were just 17 years old, and it released shortly after Billy's 18th birthday. And for some perspective, these two albums were released 34 years apart from each other. That's how long Green Day has been around. 39 Smooth has that quintessential Green Day sound from the early 90s, but its age and lack of maturity compared to Green Day's later releases overshadow most of the praises that I can give to their debut record. I find that most of the songs on 39 Smooth kind of blend together and sound the same, and it's also very difficult to understand the lyrics, but I mean, that's what you'd kind of expect from high school era Green Day. Most of the songs also lack a distinct and memorable chorus, and so you'll find that most of my favorite songs are those with an intelligible chorus. But the biggest issue I have with this album is the lack of Tré Cool on the drums. Now don't get me wrong, John Kiffmeyer is great, but after listening to Green Day's later albums over and over again, you really start to feel Tré Cool's absence on this record. There's a good reason why the biggest praise of Kerplunk is how much cleaner the music sounded when Cool was on the drums. Especially since every Kiffmeyer song has the same drum beat. Unfortunately, this record does contain many of what I consider to be Green Day's weakest songs, but I mean, that's to be expected off their first album. I should mention that generally I have a harder time enjoying some of Green Day's slower paced songs, so a track like Rest really doesn't do much for me. But at least it has a damn chorus! I'm also really not that big of a fan of the song Green Day, mostly for not having a real chorus. But I might have to choose Disappearing Boy as the weakest track off of 39 Smooth. But on the other end, even the best songs on 39 Smooth have failed to make a lasting impact, not even getting any representation on the 2017 Greatest Hits album. Songs like Don't Leave Me and Going to Passalaqua provide some of the more memorable hooks on the album, and I don't know, there's something about the opening track, At the Library, that's so good, with some nice guitar work, and it's definitely the best song on the original release of 39 Smooth.
Staring across the room, are you leaving soon? I just need a little time.
Now I want to quickly talk about the 1000 Hours and Slappy EPs. Paper Lanterns off of Slappy might be my favorite. It's on par with At the Library. But on the other end, all 4 songs off of 1000 Hours aren't particularly strong, and Only of You might be the weakest song in the entire compilation. One last thing I want to say about 39 Smooth is just, it's hard for me as a 23-year-old to connect with songs that were written by high schoolers. It's much easier for me to connect to an album like Dookie, since themes of like self-loathing as a young adult are much easier for me to connect to than songs about finding out the girl at the library has a boyfriend already. Kerplunk is a big step up from 39 Smooth. The biggest difference being the introduction of Tré Cool as their drummer, as a replacement for their old drummer John Kiffmeyer. In general, that was the biggest point of praise that Green Day received with this album, since Tré Cool not only made their sound much cleaner, but his personality was also a much better fit with Billy, Joe, and Mike, especially since he would participate with them in their favorite activity. The songs on Kerplunk are much more consistent in quality, so it's a lot more difficult to pick the weakest track. And you're gonna see this a lot from me, but I'm not the biggest fan of Green Day's slower paced songs, with some obvious exceptions, so a track like No One Knows doesn't do much for me. A couple of these songs are good, but they're just not super memorable. I usually struggle to remember tracks like Private Ale, and Who Wrote Holden Caulfield is particularly unmemorable, and my pick for the weakest track on Kerplunk.
That's when I say there's no point in Fox's world and now he's getting lazy. There's no motivation and frustration makes you crazy.
On the other end, the peaks of Kerplunk far surpass that of 39 Smooth. Tracks like One of My Lies and 80 really stand out to me as super memorable and catchy, And the opening track, 2000 Light Years Away, absolutely deserved its spot on the 2017 Greatest Hits album. And I need to shout out Trey Cool's Dominated Love Slave. Oh my god. Genuinely one of my favorite songs on this album for its humor and just being one of the most unique songs on the album.
I love feeling dirty. I love feeling cheap. I love it when you hurt me.
But above all else, there's one song that I think is the clear choice for best song on Kerplunk, and it's one that some may be surprised actually debuted on this album. Welcome to Paradise actually first debuted on Kerplunk in 1991 before being re-recorded and re-released for Dookie in 1994. But the original song is from this record. But Welcome to Paradise on Kerplunk does stand out to me as the best track on this album. I mean, what can I say? It's hard to do better than Welcome to Paradise. Now we're getting into the meat of it. Dookie is everything that 39 Smooth and Kerplunk were building up to, and it's the ultimate statement from Green Day saying, this is our sound, this is our style. It's difficult to explain the vast step up from Kerplunk to Dookie. It's like Kerplunk was the band's time to experiment with their new drummer, and over the next 2 years, they perfected that sound for Dookie. Where do I even begin to talk about the best song on this album? I feel like there's a legitimate case for like 6 of the songs on this record. I know that When I Come Around is super popular, but I'll be honest, I'm not as big of a fan of it as I think most people are. I'm much more partial to the 5 songs I'd say are above it. Burnout is the ultimate opening track. It sets the tone perfectly and even gives Trey Cool some time to shine. She is also an absolute banger that I'm shocked wasn't more popular when it came out. But above all else is Dookie's Big 3. I already talked about Welcome to Paradise when it was on Kerplunk, so here's a cleaner, better version of it for 1994. And Longview is one of Green Day's most iconic songs from their entire catalog, and one that I've particularly connected to this year. However, none of them compare to the absolute juggernaut that is Basket Case.
Sometimes I give myself the creeps. Sometimes my mind plays tricks on me.
The best song off of Dookie and Green Day's most streamed song on Spotify. Mostly because Boulevard of Broken Dreams got snubbed, but that's a conversation for another time. For me, struggling with mental health issues this year, I feel like Basket Case was able to help me really express and come to terms with those feelings. And the album as a whole has helped me through a pretty difficult time in my life. So I fucking love Dookie, man. The album as a whole is unbelievably consistent, and it's part of the reason why I choose to say weakest instead of worst songs, because projects like Dookie don't really have any bad songs. I'd say I'm not the biggest fan of Sassafras Roots and Amenia Sleepus, and FOD has a 2-minute long acoustic intro and a short underwhelming payoff, so that's probably the weakest song on this album. Is what I would say if it wasn't for the bonus track.
I was alone. I was all by myself.
I think the answer is pretty obvious that this is the weakest song off of Dookie. Sung by Trey Cool, All By Myself is a joke bonus song at the very end of the album. And to be honest, it's like kind of hard to say it's the weakest because it's a joke song and it's not really meant to be taken too seriously. But still, I think it's relevant enough to say that All By Myself is the weakest track on Dookie. You'll have to excuse me for this one. I have the reflective 25th anniversary edition of Insomniac, so it's gonna reflect the light. So sorry about that. But anyway, Insomniac has that same consistency of sound that Dookie has, with a notably heavier tone. I see this album as a sister to Dookie, with enough similarities, but different enough to give it its own identity. There's a reason why Insomniac is described as heavier than Dookie. The lyrics of the album go further into the mental unrest expressed in the previous album, with the main character going from depressed and lonely all the way to genuinely losing his mind and falling apart. I think tracks like No Pride and Babs Yuvala Who play into this new heavy style to perfection, but it also kind of highlights the issue I have with most songs on this album. And it's that they all sound the same. Green Day didn't quite nail down variety until their 5th album, so most of the songs on their first 4 have this issue where they kind of sound the same, with Dookie suffering the least from this issue. So while songs like Westbound Sign and Armitage Shanks are still really good Green Day songs, they don't do this style as well as other better songs on the album. And that goes especially for Tightwad Hill, which I would consider the weakest track on Insomniac. All that being said, there is one track on this album that stands out among the rest and really defines the sound of Insomniac.
On my own, here we go.
The most unique track on the album, the heaviest sound with the bleakest lyrics. I like to think of Brain Stew as a sequel to Longview, where the main character has fallen so far, abusing his vices for so long that he feels like he's genuinely falling apart and his brain is turning into mush. Brain Stew is the defining track of Insomniac, and it's hard not to associate the album cover with that heavy guitar intro. However, it's not quite my favorite. I don't know what it is, but there's something about Walking Contradiction, the closing track, that I can't help but smile every time it comes on. I don't know, maybe it's ever since I saw the music video, because the music video for Walking Contradiction is my favorite Green Day music video, and every time since I've seen it, every time the song comes on, I can't help but smile, man. I love Walking Contradiction. I don't even know where to start with Nimrod. Green Day's second best album to date, and I will stand firm on that opinion. Great tone and tempo, incredible variety, and some of Green Day's most memorable songs. Nimrod doesn't really have any particularly weak songs either. I mean, I don't find Worry Rock or Reject to be particularly memorable, and the chorus of Hashinka is a little too repetitive, but it's absolutely made up for by Trey Cool's drumming. I think there's one obvious answer for the weakest song on the album, and it's Last Ride In. A 3-minute long instrumental with no lyrics, so there really isn't anything to say about it. I just end up skipping it every time I listen because it's boring. Everything else on Nimrod is super memorable, and I find myself coming back all the time because of its variety and the high quality. But above all, there are 4 tracks on this album that particularly connect with me. I've recently fallen in love with Redundant. Hitchin' a Ride might be the second most popular song on this album and covers the struggles with staying sober. And Uptight goes hand in hand with Hitchin' a Ride in helping me find the words for issues that I've been facing recently, and connecting with these 2 songs has made me really appreciate Nimrod. In any other world, Uptight would be my favorite track on this album, but it's hard to talk about Nimrod without mentioning one particular juggernaut.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road.
undebatably the most popular song on this album and the defining song of Nimrod as a whole. Good Riddance sat unfinished and unreleased for a while because it wasn't really the Green Day style, but since Nimrod was so experimental, they gave it a shot, and oh my god. The popularity of Good Riddance is unprecedented and proves to audiences that Green Day's range is unmatched. Nimrod as a whole showed audiences that Green Day was much bigger than punk rock, that they've outgrown their niche to become one of the most prolific rock bands of all time. I can't believe audiences in 2000 let this album flop. Warning is one of the most consistent albums that Green Day have ever made, and I love it just as much as every other album in their discography. And I've stressed variety as a positive within albums, but I think I like the variety that Warning as an album contributes to Green Day's discography as a whole. I love that Warning is solely unique amongst all their other albums, and I will not be tolerating any Warning slander around here. The consistency and quality of the songs on Warning can only be matched by the few albums I have ranked higher than it. Every song is good, and I mean every one. I know I've said I'm not the biggest fan of Green Day's slower paced songs, so when I first listened to the album I wasn't the biggest fan of Macy's Day Parade, but after realizing its anti-consumerist message, it's grown on me a lot. Some of the tracks on the album just don't stand out as much as the rest. Songs like Fashion Victim and Jackass aren't super memorable, but above all, I think Hold On might be the weakest song on this album. But you gotta believe me when I say that this was the hardest, weakest track to pick. That's just how consistent the album is. But on the other end, the highs of Warning peak as some of my favorite folk songs ever written. Misery is incredibly unique and leans heavy into the folk genre. Meanwhile, tracks like Minority and the titular song Warning incorporate both elements of folk and a more aggressive acoustic sound. Notably, Waiting might be the most popular song off the album and is a favorite amongst my friends, but I'm more partial to my personal favorite song. I don't know what it is about it, but there's something about Castaway that just has the perfect energy, and I find it stuck in my head all the time. So this is your sign to listen to Warning and give it the long overdue praise that it deserved when it came out. Here we go. This is my favorite album of all time. The fact that this even exists proves that we aren't living in the worst possible timeline. For American Idiot to even get made, first, Warning has to fail miserably, and second, the demos for Cigarettes and Valentines has to be stolen in 2002. Without that, we may never have gotten my favorite album ever made. American Idiot perfectly expresses my feelings towards the world and the country that I live in, and that's why I adore this album so much. The lineup of tracks is so strong that I only really see one option as the weakest song on the album, and that's Are We the Waiting. It's less of a standalone song and more of an introduction to St. Jimmy, so for that, I gotta say it's the weakest. Some other songs I'd say are weaker are like Homecoming, mainly because Homecoming really needs the context of the rest of the album to work as well as it does. Standing on its own, Homecoming can be confusing and doesn't quite work as well. I'd also say Extraordinary Girl is one of the weaker ones. Not for any particular reason, just because it isn't as spectacular as every other song on this record. Speaking of which, holy shit! How am I supposed to pick a best track from this album? Every song is spectacular in its own way. It makes the decision so difficult. In fact, I polled my friends to ask them what their favorite song on this album was, and I'm not kidding, I got 8 different answers. Kara and Emma chose the titular track American Idiot as their favorite song on the album. American Idiot, the song, perfectly sums up everything that American Idiot, the album, is.
Welcome to a new kind of tension all across the alien mission. Everything is meant to be okay.
The themes, the music, the tone. American Idiot, the song, is the album. Hayden's favorite is Jesus of Suburbia, the 9-minute long anthem introducing the main character of the opera. The 5-parter is so tightly written, I can't believe it's so consistently good over the course of 9 damn minutes. I also want to say I love the structure of having Jesus of Suburbia as the second song and Homecoming as the penultimate song. Those two kind of bound the album together, and they're good mirrors for each other, both being 90 minutes long. John's favorite song, Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Arguably Green Day's most popular song they've ever released. It's hard to describe how unbelievably huge that song was when it came out. It came out maybe a year after I was born and was on the radio my entire childhood. Even into my early internet days, I remember seeing and hearing the song being still used in popular media back in like 2013 on early YouTube. Josh's favorite is Give Me Novocaine, one of the slower songs with a killer sound and my favorite drum beat on the album.
Take away the sensation inside. Bittersweet migraine in my head.
I remember I used to listen to Give Me Novocaine so I could get to She's a Rebel because I was a really big fan of She's a Rebel when I first heard it. But over time, I started to appreciate Give Me Novocaine more, and now I think it is the better song. And speaking of She's a Rebel, that is Vincent's favorite song on American Idiot. The introduction of what's-her-name, the love interest of the main character, Jesus of Suburbia. Donald was a huge advocate for Letter Bomb, an absolute masterpiece that I've even seen someone say is the greatest song that Green Day's ever made. Now, I'm not personally there, but it is up there, man. It's such a shame Letter Bomb never got released as a single because it's just as good as all the other songs in that category. Holiday is my personal favorite song on the album, the most explicitly political, anti-war song, and a big fuck you to George Bush.
I beg to dream and if they're wrong, all arise. This is the dawning of the rest of our lives.
And it even has renewed relevance today. Ever since our pedophile president got us involved in Iran, now it's a big fuck you to Donald Trump. I think it's that renewed relevance, that message applies even today, that has made Holiday jump up to my favorite track on this album. There is one song, however, while not my favorite on the album, I do have to honor the poll that I sent to my friends and choose this as the best song on American Idiot because Love, Av, and Carissa all said that their favorite song on American Idiot is Wake Me Up When September Ends.
And never last. Wake me up when September ends.
Unfortunately, I struggle to find the words to explain how great this song is and how beautiful the words of a grieving 10-year-old could be. I think it's a testament to how incredible of a songwriter Billie Joe Armstrong really is. I love everything about Wake Me Up When September Ends. It's the best slower paced song Green Day's ever made, and it's placed perfectly in the context of the album despite having nothing to do with the story. I sent out that poll to my friends as an experiment to prove my point that American Idiot is so deep in quality that pretty much any song on this album can be someone's favorite from the album. There are at least 6 songs on this record that I would consider to be 10 out of 10s. That's half the fucking album. It's why American Idiot is not just my favorite Green Day album, but my favorite album in general. You know, I'll admit, the first time I listened to 21st Century Breakdown, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. because it's slower paced than all of Green Day's earlier stuff, and I saw it as a negative at first. 21st Century Breakdown is Green Day's longest album to date at nearly 70 minutes long. And for the record, that's almost 3 times as long as Father of All Motherfuckers. But as time has gone on, I've started to fall in love with this album. Especially since I got the vinyl record, I found myself putting this on over and over again. I love the rock opera era of Green Day. It's easily my favorite. All of the songs on this album that I'd say are the weakest are there just because they simply don't stand out much from the rest. Last of the American Girls and Static Age are only down here because they're just more generic than the rest of them, and Christian's Inferno's chorus leaves a lot to be desired. Although the absolute weakest isn't really that close in my mind, it's Restless Heart Syndrome.
I think they found another cure for broken hearts and feelings.
It's another one of the slow songs, but this one just kind of feels inferior to Last Night on Earth in most ways. But on the other end, 21st Century Breakdown has some of the best anthems that Green Day have ever made. Horseshoes and Hand Grenades has an undeniable power to it. Almost as undeniable as Know Your Enemy, one of Green Day's most popular and recognizable songs. The depth of writing in Before the Lobotomy is outstanding, one of the most impressive songs that Green Day have ever written. And there's something so fun about Viva La Gloria Little Girl. I don't know, man. I severely underrated it in the past, and I'll admit to that. Because now, today, it's one of my favorite songs to drum to.
Run away from the river to the street and find yourself with your face in the gutter.
However, my favorite song on this album is one that breaks my previously established rules. I've been consistently ranking Green Day's slower paced songs towards the bottom of my list, but I don't know, man. There's just something about 21 Guns that is so fucking special.
21 guns, lay down your arms, give up the fight.
I don't know, maybe it's the way it picks up over the course of the 5-minute runtime. It's just incredible. I don't know how to say it. It's one of the few exceptions to my anti-slow song bias. Uno, the first album of the trilogy and the first to suffer from the problems that I have with the trilogy. Now don't get me wrong, I do appreciate and love Uno, Dos, and Tres, but I think people would mostly agree that they are some of Green Day's weakest albums. And I've seen a lot of opinions on rankings of the three. I'm gonna stand firm on Uno being the best one of the trilogy. Now Uno does have really consistent quality of songs, but none of them really stand out amongst the rest as one of Green Day's best. I will say though that I really do like songs like Stay the Night and Kill the DJ, with the latter being particularly raunchy for this album. I really do love Nuclear Family as the opener for the album, and Oh Love is the most unique sounding song on the record and probably the most popular. In the past, I would have said Oh Love was the best song on the album, but recently I've kind of fallen in love with Let Yourself Go. It's just edgy enough and perfectly describes that feeling of wanting someone to just shut the fuck up already. I also want to point out that there's this little bit in Let Yourself Go that makes me laugh every single time. Right before the second chorus starts, you can hear Mike Dirnt in the background screaming, "Shut the fuck up!" I love it. I'm all for bits like that. It's hilarious.
Sick to death of your every last breath, and I don't give a fuck anyway. Let yourself go, let yourself go, let yourself go. Let yourself go, let yourself go.
On the weak side, I'd say that Rusty James and Troublemaker aren't very strong, but they're still pretty good. I'd probably say Fell For You is the weakest song on the album. It just feels like a worse version of Stay the Night, but I think it's mainly the pissed in the bed line at the beginning of the song that kind of turns me away from it.
Had a dream that I kissed your lips and it felt so true. Then I woke up as a nervous wreck and I fell for you.
On a note about the whole trilogy, I think the main issue is the sheer amount of content and how stretched thin each album is. The documentary Quattro tells the story of how these albums were made, and it's as simple as Billy Joe just kept writing songs and didn't stop. He wrote so many songs that they decided to make it a triple album release. So instead of trimming out the weaker songs to make a more consistent product, they kind of just included all of the songs that would have normally been cut for time. And I think that decision leads to the trilogy just feeling bloated with unmemorable songs, and in my opinion, they front-loaded most of the good songs onto Uno, leaving Dos and Tre to be far less consistent and memorable. Speaking of Dos, so yeah, I only have the CD copy of Dos. If you know anything about Green Day's records, you'd know that the trilogy are extremely rare and very expensive. Uno is the only one of the trilogy I have, and I had to settle for the CD versions of Dos and Tre. It's also part of the reason I threw up this CD player as well, so I could listen to these. Being the middle child of the trilogy, the idea behind Dos was it was supposed to be the edgy one, while Uno and Tre were lighter in theme. But it makes me think, why is Stray Heart on Dos? I don't know, I had this thought that Stray Heart feels so different from every other song on this album. I feel like Stray Heart should have been on Uno, and maybe Kill the DJ should have been on Dos. But the thing is, that would just make Uno better and Dos worse. As in, worse than Tre, maybe even Green Day's weakest album overall. That's just how unbelievably hard Stray Heart carries this album. The quality of Dos is far less consistent than that of Uno. It does have some bangers like Stop When the Red Lights Flash, Lazy Bones, and especially Stray Heart, the best song on the album.
Everything that I want from you, but I just can't have you.
But then it also has its fair share of stinkers like Wild One, Nightlife, Amy, and Wow That's Loud, which, true to its name, I usually have to turn down when I'm listening to it. I was just reading the script and I realized I never actually chose a weakest song for Dos. I'll probably go with Nightlife because I think that's the community consensus weakest song on this album. And some people even consider it to be their weakest song in general.
Taking a ride to my old haunts. She's in my blood, I reside in my nightlife.
Damn, I guess I really don't have that much to say about Dos. I do love the production quality of the whole trilogy, so that's a big plus. And I will give it that Dos does have the most distinct personality of all the albums in the trilogy. My final thought is that the fourth track, Lazy Bones, is goated and needs more praise. Oh, Trey Cool, you beautiful short man. I'm sorry. Oh, Trey Cool, you beautiful short man. I'm so sorry that the only album named after you is the weakest in your entire Green Day catalog, but I promise you, my inspiration, that one day I will have your face on my wall in the form of a 12-inch vinyl record. But I guess I'll just settle with the CD for now. I don't think it's unpopular to say that Tre is the weakest album in the trilogy. But that reputation is such a shame because Tre is a crazy good album. It's just that Green Day happens to have 12 even better albums. Tre does have quite a few songs that I'd say are just very forgettable. On re-listens, I tend to tune out songs like 8th Avenue Serenade and Walk Away. The Forgotten is another slow song that I'm not too big on, but above all else, it's Drama Queen that I think is the weakest song on the album. It is the first Green Day song that I listened to and thought, wow, this is kind of bad.
She is my drama queen. Her life is now unfolding. There goes my drama queen.
Pretty much everything else on the album kind of falls into that almost forgettable category, but I do want to highlight both Brutal Love and Amanda for being two of my favorites. However, amongst all the forgettable songs, there is one that stands out like Victor Wembanyama at an elementary school.
Yeah, yeah.
Dirty Rotten Bastards is the best song of the entire trilogy. There, I said it. Yes, I've thought this through. It's better than any of Uno or Dose's best. Yes, it's better than Stray Heart. Yes, it's better than Nuclear Family, Let Yourself Go, Oh Love. In fact, my biggest issue with Trey as an album is that they only released 2 singles from it, and those were The Forgotten and X-Kid, instead of Dirty Rotten Bastards.
On an adventure. Fuck the world, this is my revolution. Long lost souls and living in cages.
I see Dirty Rotten Bastards as the climax of the trilogy, containing callbacks to not just other songs in the trilogy, but to songs in their entire discography. It also features some really crazy solos from Jason White on the guitar and Mike Dirnt going wild on his bass. Revolution Radio, to me, feels like what the trilogy should have been. It's the same sort of sound, but this time it's just one album, which means all the filler was cut and everything is a lot more consistent this time. There's not really anything on this album that's super forgettable. Unfortunately, I don't really have that much to say about Revolution Radio. It's very much an average Green Day album, which, keep in mind, is a good thing. And it also turns 10 years old later this year. Songs like Youngblood and Troubled Times are on the weaker end, mainly because they just don't stand out to me as much as the other ones. So normally I would pick one of those as the weakest, if it weren't for Ordinary World, the closing track.
Where can I find the city of shining light in an ordinary world?
And I know, blah, 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 Jacob, slower tempo songs, get over yourself. I know, I'll admit, Ordinary World is well written. It's cute, it's a cute song. It's just not my tempo, you know? But on the other end, a lot of the songs on this record have an unmatched energy that will leave you bouncing off the wall. Kinda like the song Bouncing Off the Wall. Too Dumb to Die and Revolution Radio have crazy good energy, but it's nothing on Bang Bang. One of the fastest paced songs they've ever recorded, and including my favorite drum fill in any Green Day song. I promise one day I'm gonna learn that. It's gonna take a bit. Now normally I would pick Bang Bang as the best song on Revolution Radio if I didn't have a really special connection with Still Breathing.
'Cause I'm still breathing, 'cause I'm still breathing on my own. My head's above the rain and roses.
I know, Still Breathing, it's a little cheesy, it's very PG compared to the rest of the album, but the song does have a lot of sentimental value to me. Those who know me closely know that I went through knee surgery in 2024 when I was just 20 years old. Recovering from a traumatic knee injury, Still Breathing was one of the songs that inspired me to keep pushing towards recovery. Learning to simply walk again was one of the hardest challenges I've faced so far in my life, and to this day, I usually have to fight back tears while listening to this song. Look, I don't know why y'all hate this album so much. I don't get it. Like, yes, it's one of their weaker ones, but not because of the quality, because it's only 25 minutes long. 2 more songs, and Father of All Motherfuckers might be in the top half of Green Day albums. Just like Warning, Father of All is totally unique in its sound compared to other albums, and I like that. That's a good thing. Like, I can't stress enough how I don't understand why Green Day fans hate this album so much. Maybe it has to do with being disappointed in the release, but like, guys, I'm a new Green Day fan. I wasn't there for the release of this album, so I can't possibly be disappointed in anything other than the length. Like, 25 minutes? Brother, that's EP length. At least Kerplunk and Insomniac are like 30 plus. The album is really consistent. I can't even point to that many weak songs. I'd say Junkies on a High isn't spectacular, but it's a really good slow burn song. The only one that I'm impartial to is I Was a Teenager, and I can't really tell you why other than just it's kind of slow.
I was a teenager, full of piss and vinegar.
However, the highs of Father of All are fucking great, man. The titular song, Father of All, is undeniable in its energy, and tracks like Graffitia and Fire Ready Aim help define the unique sound of this album. But above the rest, Stab You in the Heart is my absolute favorite song on this album.
I wanna stab you in the heart. I wanna stab you in the heart. Bloody heart.
I don't know, something about being the only surfer rock song that Green Day has made. I'm in love with how the guitar melody swings up and down in the chorus. It's perfect. I knew from the moment I listened to it for the first time that Stab You in the Heart was gonna be one of my favorite Green Day songs, and it still is. Green Day's most recent album, and undoubtedly the best album they've made since 21st Century Breakdown. And I will continue to defend this album until I die. Saviors is so good, man. Even into their 50s, Green Day still continues to crush it. The pool of songs to choose the weakest from is quite small, and I think the answer is pretty obvious. I'd say that songs like Coma City and 1981 just are a little bit weaker and don't stand out as much, and Strange Days Are Here to Stay is only down here because it's a little too corny in its lyrics. Father to a Son is another one that I'd say is weaker, but has a really nice slow build-up. I think it's pretty clear though that the weakest song on Saviors is the closing track, Fancy Sauce. Another slow song with not much energy, but I still do really like the content of the lyrics. The best song on the album isn't very difficult to pick either. Even though it is filled with bangers and mainstays like The American Dream Is Killing Me, Look Mono, Brains, Bobby Socks, Corvette Summer, and a special shout out to One Eyed Bastard for having the absolute best energy on the record. Even though those are all instant classics, there's nothing else on Saviors quite on the same level as Dilemma. Even though I don't quite have the words to describe what puts it above everything else on this album, I've seen nothing else but universal praise online for the 5th track of Saviors. One more note, I want to defend Bobby Socks real quick. Hayden does not like this song, and every time it's on, he compares it to the Billy Cobb video. Yes, I am well aware of the Billy Cobb Green Day video, and I totally get where his criticism is coming from.
I'm in love with you, and the government is bad.
Green Day have definitely softened up since their early days, and on the surface, Bobby Socks does sound like I'm in love with you. I think that's on purpose. The way I see it, Bobby Socks was written intentionally to be as cheesy as possible, and then it counters that by being the absolute loudest song on the album. I think the genius behind it is the contrast between the cheesy lyrics and how loud Billy is screaming them while playing their instruments loud as fuck. If you want an example of an actually cheesy song, look no further than Strange Days Are Here to Stay, a song you could tell was written unironically and to me is actually the corniest song that Green Day have ever made.